This week we're looking at Kimura, Guillotine, and Bump Sweep, KGB. And I do always teach them together because one can lead to the other, can lead to the other. So you can chain them. Rather than a chain of moves, I like to think of them as a web of moves because really each connects to both of the other two. We're going to start with the Kimura. So the Kimura is traditionally taught this way, and I'm going to teach it to you this way first, but I'm going to show you another way to get into the entry position in a minute. But first, we're going to do this. I'm going to swim under his arms, and I'm going to lift my belly, and then use my hands like windshield wipers to put his hands on the floor out here, but I'm also going to pull him at the same time. Okay, so one more time. So my hips go up, and when I land, I start pulling him forward. Okay. I want his hands to land as far south, really honestly, as possible. From here, I'm going to put 2 feet on the floor, and I'm going to sit up to my elbow, and then grab his wrist with the hand that was already there. Grab his wrist here, lace over his tricep, and hold my own wrist behind here. So I'm holding his watch, and my second hand is holding my own watch. From here, I look over my shoulder. This starts me in the correct direction. I look over my shoulder, and we start to fall here, and I'm going to hip out from underneath him. I'd like him to land next to me with not much of me underneath him, just really my leg underneath him. When that's true, if it's not true, I'll hip out, shoulder out until it is true. Then I'll recross my feet. I hug his tricep to me, and then I'm going to bring his hand toward his head for the finish. One more time. My hands come underneath. I'm going to lift my hips up, and as I drop and pull him forward, I actually not place, but just block his hands as far south as I can. Now I'll put my feet down. I sit up over this shoulder, and I'm going to grab his wrist with the hand that was already there, and then my wrist with the one that wove behind. From here, look over your shoulder, and you're going to fall this way. If he lands on you at all, just hip out, and he should be pretty belly down next to you, maybe on his knees, but definitely without you under him. Recross your feet, and then keep his arm in an L. Hug the tricep to you, and bring the hand toward the head. I do that by turning my body, not by doing this, pushing his arm away from me. I actually keep his arm real tight to me, and then I turn this way. Now let's talk about a different way to get to the setup position that's a little more versatile. I'm still going to come under the hands and make him post on the floor here. And this time I'm going to emphasize a detail it's true in the other one, but it's all of this one. So when I put my feet on the ground and I sit up, I'm going to hip out. I'm hipping out so far that if I let go of him, I'm comfortably sitting, meaning not doing a sit-up. So like this takes effort, and like sitting doesn't take effort. This time, I'm just going to come to here. Okay? So I'm just going to have a post, and I have my arm over the back. We're going to start the same way. My hips come up, pull forward, and I'm going to sit up and hip out. Now I'm comfortable. If I wanted the Kimura in this case, my advice to you is going to be to connect everything at once. Because when I do this, usually people who have been around know what your next thought is. But if you do this, it's too late and you already have everything. Okay, so in this version, we're sitting up first. We're in a comfortable attack position from which we're going to be able to do all 3 of these, K, G, and B. And once I get to that position, this position, which gives nothing really away, but all of them are options to me, we're going to set up Kimura like this. I'm just going to make all contact at the same time rather than this or this, one at a time. I'm still here, and this time my feet down. When I sit up, I hip escape a lot. And now I'm sitting upright, kind of not doing a sit up, very comfortably. The Kimura, I'm just going to try to sort of fly trap the arm. I'm going to do everything at once. And then same finish, you can look over your shoulder, fall back, hip out, make sure you're not underneath the person, recross. Don't forget to be keeping the L in the arm and hugging the upper arm to you to finish here. Okay, when someone's in my guard and I want to sit up for this, any of the moves in this series, it can definitely be awkward. It's most awkward if I don't uncross my feet. So the sitting up part, everything's harder with my feet off the ground, so that's why we just put them on the ground. So, 1. And I'm going to give you a tip that I do. Going this way is all abs. If I'm going that way, I side bend away first. So if I'm going left, I actually side bend right first, and I hike my elbow up because it's easy to roll up over my forearm now. So you can see that after, and when I'm going this way, after I side bend and lift my elbow, I just roll right over my forearm. It's a very small speed bump. It's an insignificant speed bump, all the way up to my hand. When I get up to my hand, my arm is now draped. And my fingertips point backwards. The reason my fingertips point backwards is it's a really common response for the person to push into you, and we have an attack for that. We'll talk about it. But if my fingers are anything other than pointing backwards, then my elbow bends that way. And when they push into me, I have no support, as opposed to when my fingers point backwards, I have a very good, stiff, straight arm support. Now I want to talk about if they give you that very common reaction of driving into you. So I'm going to do the same setup. And this time, when I get up to this sort of setup position, this time the new detail to focus on is how far I'm retracting this foot. I want to get my heel as far back as his knee. It doesn't stop me from doing anything that you just did. But when my heel is retracted this far, I can react when the person pushes into me. So if he pushes into me, I can now back way up. I backed up a full leg's length. My foot, by the way, never left the ground. I didn't kick out. I just rolled over my heel. And as he chases me here, I have time and space, most importantly space. Space is very hard to come by to finish a guillotine when you're trying to finish in guard, but to wrap a guillotine. So he was driving into me and I caught his neck with all this space in here. Both hands are in front of shoulders. Nothing is under an armpit. Nothing's under an armpit. Both hands in front of shoulders. And from here, he can drive me the rest of the way flat. I'm going to cross my legs around him. I can arch to lift the blade of the guillotine and extend my legs, both at the same time. Give me that nice choke. So it's here. But this is the new detail. Just retract this foot as much as possible so that when he drives into me, see how I don't leave the ground, but I rolled over that heel. My arm still draped over his back, now just wraps, and this one comes in, connect over the head, cross my feet, and I can extend my lower body and arch my upper body, pulling this guillotine that's perpendicular to his spine up with his head trapped. The only thing you need to lock and load is this foot so that you can back up and don't kick. Just roll over it. You'll get a full leg's length distance. That's like 3 feet, 4 feet for some of you guys. Let's do it. 3, 2, 1. I want to help you guys back up and give yourself the most time and space possible, and this will help. When you put your feet down, side bend, and get up, and retract your foot. So that's super important. Everybody's doing a good job of that. I'm so far back I actually can't put my heel on the ground. I'm just on the ball of my foot. I'm just very far back. So that's all helpful. And then when somebody drives into me to knock me down, what won't help, even if I do this right and I back up, is if I'm doing a sit-up and I'm trying to fit this now, it just becomes difficult. So the detail I have for you guys is once you're up in this position and this foot is retracted, and that's all perfect, when you back up, try to make this shape with your body. Try to back up into this shape. So when I'm in this like sideways U shape, what happens is they run into my chest first, and that knocks me over, and then slowly this space fills. It buys me an extra second to wrap the choke where the choke happens, which is in the very last quarter of this sort of U shape. When you get up and retract this foot and back up, don't back up like this. Back up like this, so that they have to enter this danger zone where you can wrap the head where it comes into first, right? Let's look at the bump sweep. I'm going to start the same way. I'm just getting up to that same launch position, right? Putting these down. My feet go down. I side bend away from this arm so I can rock easily up over it. And I back my hips up so that I'm comfortably sitting. The right time to hit a bump sweep is always when they're moving backwards. So if he tries to get away from me by sitting up and back, yeah, that's the moment. The moment to go is when there's, I always say, like a golden flashing arrow pointing backwards behind him, indicating that action, right? So if he backs up at all, I'm gonna come up, catch his arm, attach his bicep to my body, and this foot can lay down. I wanna point my toes, not be on them. Don't be on your toes here, that's a safety thing. So point your toes like a ballerina. On this side, I'm gonna hit him in the sternum with my pelvis. Step over to mount position. I'm gonna get up to our position, and if he decides I'm not comfortable with this and he starts backing up, yeah, I'm gonna collect his arm, my hips follow him and engage. I'm gonna hit him in the chest essentially with my pelvis, knock him over, and go right to the top of mount position. This is one of our first sweeps, one of our easiest sweeps, and still works at the very highest levels between top competitors. Get up to here, any backward movement, I'm gonna bump him in the chest with my pelvis. It's important that your hips are higher than their hips, which is why it's so important that you're on your hand and not your elbow. I mean, this is not the position I start from. I don't try to knock someone over here. If he's tall or big, it's gonna be hard to do as compared to this. Boom, I can get nice height here and a lot of power behind that connection that I made. Okay. Let's try it. 3, 2, 1. When you do a bump sweep, there's a chance you run into a person who, when rolled, employs all their strength and tries to continue the rolling motion and get on top of you. So you're gonna be that spaz for me right now. So I'm gonna move the hands, get to this position. When I roll him, he's gonna do something that is a natural instinct for people, especially even if they don't know jiu-jitsu, I should say, which is when he sits up, I go for this. And when we hit the ground, he tries to roll through and get back on top. And we have momentum that direction, so it's a good idea and really can work for the person. So I want to give you 2 things to do to prevent the re-roll. Those 2 things are, put my foot out, so don't go to my knee. Sometimes I say this when you step over a mount too, is don't step over to your knee, step over to your foot. So that's what I'm going to do here. My right foot, which is this one, I'm going to throw over him when we land. I'm going to make sure my sole of my foot touches down first. So let me emphasize that too. So first, we're here, 1. Okay? So when that hits the ground, I have this nice kickstand here. Reroll me now. No way, not even with the momentum. Because, super good kickstand. And I only am here for a half second and then put my knee down and go to mount. I only need to kill that moment in which he could have used momentum against me. So that's one of the things I'm doing. The other I actually am doing right now, it helps me put my foot out, but I'm hanging back. So if this is Matt's center line, I'm like way on this side of the center line. So I rolled him this way, but I hung back, and it's again so that he's not very deep here. If I was here, it'd be easier, not with the foot there, but it'd be easier to get a deeper purchase on me. But here, he's only gonna have like his little wrist still wrapped around me. So together, they look like this. See how I'm hanging back and my foot is posted, and then I'll put my knee down, and then I'll collapse my foot in and take my nice mount. Now, how does Kimura set up a bump sweep? That's the first one we'll look at. So Kimura, if from here I start to set this up, and her idea of extracting her arm, which is many people's idea, is going to be to sit up and yank her arm sort of up. Yes, she's moving the right direction. Up or backwards, basically her butt coming off her heels is the right direction for me to then hit the bump sweep. So I come here. I get up to our launch position. All 3 of these launch from this same place here. So that if I set this up and she resists, yes, that way, I'm set up nicely for a bump sweep. We're talking about how the guillotine connects to the bump sweep. Then first we have to get all the way to the guillotine. So we're gonna start our move here. When I sit up, I retract my foot. This I do always. I always mention it when I'm talking about guillotine, but always this is part of this position. Okay. Now if she starts to drive into me, I back way up and I wrap her head. And this is the beginning of the guillotine. If I want to finish it, I'd cross my legs over her back, sit back, and arch my back to finish. But sometimes when someone's head gets caught in this stockade, their initial reaction is to pull backwards, to try and pull out of it, yes. One more time, if I want to see the guillotine set up the bump sweep. I set up like this, my foot is retracted, she drives in. That gives me space to back up, catch her head, but if she runs like a cat might, gets its head caught in some door, it's not supposed to be in, and then it just starts retracting. That's a common response, is that people back up like that, and I only need to follow, stay connected, and do all the other steps of a good bump sweep. Now let's talk about putting Kimura at the end of a chain of moves. So let's talk first about bump sweep. These combine really nicely, actually. When I sit up to our KGB setup position, which is this one here, it may be that the person starts to back up. And I may go for the bump sweep, and there are people who, either because I missed a detail that I should have had, or because of their power, flexibility, or something, can still find their way to posting on the ground to catch themselves, and they get it. That stops my bump sweep. I'm set up really nicely now for the Kimura again, because I really only need to drop to my elbow here, and I've already got it. What starts as a bump sweep, when she catches herself, becomes a Kimura. I still have to get out from under her. Don't skip any of your other steps. Hug this to you and finish here. But you'll find that when that hand hits the ground, it's a hand that can't go anywhere, because now it's got a job. Now it's carrying her weight, and any hand that's like stuck where it is ripe for attack. If we're talking about landing in a Kimura, when first I was attacking a guillotine, maybe it would look something like this. There's a lot of things that could happen, but maybe it looks something like this. Remove the hands. I set up, she drives in, so at first it's a guillotine. And same thing, when she starts to back up, her hands start to become important because she's pushing her weight off of her hands essentially. That's how she's backing up, with her head stuck. So again, the hand has become more important to her. It's left on the ground. So back yourself up by pushing up your hands. Yeah. And it becomes an easy wrap for me. Again, don't skip getting out from under them or any of the other important details on Kimura. But this is another situation where, because the person is trying to back out, their hand, we can count on where it's going to be if we make a little transition into the Kimura. See, she pushes into me, I wrap the head, and she starts running. Yeah. Combo we partly talked about, because I introduced the guillotine as a what if, basically in combination. It was if they drove into you. And they could be driving into you when you're doing either of the first moves. So first, let's just look at that real quick. I'm going to clear the hands, get up to my position here, and this foot is retracted always. Now we talked about guillotine if he just drives in from here, which could happen, and I'll back up. Of course, it could also happen if I chose to go for his arm. Matter of fact, this is common, and this is one of the first ways I learned the guillotine. If I try to collect his arm here, it's definitely possible that he wraps his arms around my torso and hugs me. That hides this arm really nicely. And then they'll drive into you, and that's when we can back away and wrap the guillotine. Okay? So it actually is common, and a good defense. When I go for Kimura, his arm's already bent, and my body's already right there. He just wraps it around me, and it does sort of hide his arm from me. I've sat up to our position here, and when I choose this, now, this is why I like to connect all at once, because it's hard for him to do this if I do that. But if I let him know I'm doing a Kimura, and he hides his arms around my body, okay, now I can't finish a Kimura, and he's probably driving into me, and that's when I can back way away and catch the guillotine. That's one of the times we can hit it, and that's off of a Kimura. Off the bump sweep, it could be same thing where I'm just in this position. he first decides to back up, and so I start moving forward. He sees that, and then he pushes backwards. And now I have to back up where he chases me, and I catch the guillotine. We get in this forward-backward battle. There's one more guillotine that I think is worth exploring, which is in response to the real bump sweep defense. If I got to this position and it became time to do the bump sweep, like he started to move backwards, and I start to go, it's when he postures up, hips forward. Yeah. Now, remember how I told you how important it was to get my hips above his hips and hit him in the chest? Like, I can't knock him over. I can have total control of his arm, but not knock him over. Okay? And you can imagine this only gets worse if someone's even taller than him, or our height disparity is even greater. So I have a response that I always do when someone does the real defense to the bump sweep, which is to get upright like that, hips forward. And that is, I take it as a cue not to be on the bottom anymore. If he's moving upward, now I'm going to move upward. It's kind of like I'm following his cue again. So when I go for this and he gets up, I get up. And you could imagine catching his head like in a standard guillotine from here, where I feed it, and then I'll sit back to guard to finish. So that's another way we could get there. So we have a backward guillotine, and an upward guillotine would be this version that I'm talking about here. So again, it starts from our setup position, where I was here. He starts to back up, so I start thinking bump sweep, and he defends the bump sweep with the upright posture. So I get up, then I'll wrap his head, and immediately sit back to guard, cross my feet, and finish from here. The get up is going to feel kind of awkward when he gets up, hips forward. The way that I get up, I want you to watch. It looks like something you've done before, for sure. So I have my left hand and my right foot on the floor. So when I do this, I'm really just standing in base. I'm really just standing in base. It's just a little awkward because his body's in my way. So one thing that's going to help you do this technical stand-up, this stand-up in base, is to remember to turn your chest to the floor. That's the thing that's going to drag your hip away and allow your leg to come out. So when I do this and he comes up, if I try to get my leg out, this is hard. But when I turn my chest to the floor, it drags my hip back. When I turn my chest to the floor, see how it moves my hip backwards for me? And then it'll come out. And now you're standing and you can wrap, sit, and cross again.